Fair warning, huh? Okay. Should we talk and make sure you can hear us? Okay.
Yeah. Pardon? Yeah, we're going live. Sorry.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Can.
Then I'll mute it.
You guys hear me okay?
We can, Sean. Okay, I think we are at 7 o'clock.
It is. I'm showing 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call the July 6th meeting of the Sand Springs Board of Education to order, and roll call, please.
Gunn.
Here.
Mullins.
Here.
Noggle.
Here.
Wagers.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
So this,
Next order of business would be for me to recite the oath. Is that correct?
correct.
Yes.
So we'll need someone to read the oath of office to Ms. Wagner. She was duly elected in December, but because of situation with the election and when it was postponed, we're doing the oath of office in the month of July. So I would like to hear maybe Mr. Mullins, would you like to read the oath of office?
I can do that. Let me grab it real quick. Nothing is real quick anymore.
True.
You ready, Jackie? I, Jackie Wagner,
I, Jackie Wagner,
hereby declare under oath
hereby declare under oath
that I will faithfully perform the duties of the board member
that I will faithfully perform the duties of board member
for office number 5 of the Sand Springs Public Schools
for office number 5 of the Sand Springs Public Schools
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
and that I will faithfully discharge all the duties pertaining to said office
and I will faithfully discharge all of the duties pertaining to said office
and obey the Constitution and laws of the United States and Oklahoma.
and obey the Constitution and laws of the United States and Oklahoma.
Congratulations. Thank
Yay.
you.
Thank you, Mr.
Yay,
Mullins.
yay, yay.
Awesome. Thank you. So the next item is the reorganization of the board. Jackie, I think you're in order still to ask for that motion. This has to be read.
Okay, do I have a motion for the reorganization of the Board of Education officers as stated?
And you have to read that out loud if you make the motion.
I will.
I make the motion.
So if you don't mind, Mr. Noggle, if you could go ahead and read that link. Yeah.
Motion to elect Whitney Wagers as president, Mike Mullins as vice president, Rusty Gunn as deputy clerk, and Beth Shope as board clerk.
And I will
Do I have a
second.
second?
I'll second.
Vote, please.
Excuse me. Gunn.
Aye.
Mullins.
Aye.
Noggle.
All right.
Wagers.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Congratulations, Whitney.
Woohoo!
I think that's an appropriate celebration.
I pass the official torch to Miss Wagers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now
Okay.
you get to be the brunt of all jokes from Mr. Gunn.
That's okay. Okay, let's kick it into gear. Let's, item number 4, we've got student empowerment and staff empowerment.
So we're going to go through some of the pieces that we need to discuss openly at the board meeting in July, and that is a couple of reports that signify, first of all, the comprehensive exit and dropout report for 2020, our graduation cohort report for 2018, college remediation by high school and district, and then college going rates for high school and district. And I'm going to let Mr. Beard talk about some of those reports, and just to understand that we pick up these reports by the College Board, and there's some delay in when they're posted. So Sean, if you don't mind talking through those areas, that would be great.
Right. So when you're looking at the comprehensive exit report, what this is this takes at throughout the year any student that has, for any reason, one or another, exited the district, and we have to report that obviously to the state. But one of the things that, just to note, that we do is that we try as much as we can to reach out to those students to make sure that they graduate. So whether they're exiting because they're dropping out or because they're homeschooling, we always just make a point to reach out to them to ensure that they understand what it takes to graduate on time. So that's that you're looking at is the 2019 to 2020 data. That's current data. But then when you look at, as Ms. Durkee said, when you look at the graduation cohort report, because we're looking at past data, because we don't have any current data right now for 2019 or 2020. This is older data. This is something that we have reported previously. So we're just taking a look at it again. But what this takes a look at is it's an indicator of students that graduate from Charles Page High School versus the state average. As you can see on that graduation report, we're just a little bit above or a little bit ahead of the state average. And then on the student college remediation report, again, this is data that's from the 17-18 school year, so it matches up with the graduation cohort data. And if you'll have to scroll down through this one to reach the Sand Springs data, but because this is state data that we're looking at. But if you take a look at that again, you'll have to go down to Tulsa County. And then when you get down to Tulsa County, you'll look for Charles Page High School, obviously. And then this tells you basically the number of students that from Charles Page High School that entered as freshmen, and the rates at which they're having to remediate or take coursework again that would help them get on track. And of course, that just kind of gives you an idea of where our students as freshmen in college pit against other students from across the state. The high school to college going rates, again, this is just another indicator of how our 2018 graduates are faring as freshmen in colleges. And again, you'll have to scroll down to find our data in the Tulsa County section. But again, it's just an idea of how our kids are performing comparatively. And you can see that, we're doing pretty well. I mean, as far as our kids are performing against others across the state. So we're faring pretty average comparatively. Some of this data, I think, you were going to go over the senior capstone statistics with them, correct?
Yeah, and I want to highlight that because we have, of course, according to reporting based on the school report card structure, we're reporting graduation by cohort. And what you see is the ability to gather points based on a 5-year versus 6-year versus really a 4-year cohort, meaning that we give points for students that take longer than 4 years to graduate. The design is we want them to be able to graduate in 4 years. One of the things that I'm extremely proud of is our statistics regarding our senior capstones. And if you remember a year ago in May, we were really trying to encourage businesses to partner with us for our internship program, which we defined as a capstone activity that seniors could complete upon completion of their high school career. And so Mr. Bibbin was able to formulate statistics. Our goal was to get 100% of our senior class to take part in a capstone. Internship was one of them, but we also, as you know, offer concurrent enrollment for kids that are planning to go to college, AP coursework. We have Tulsa Tech partnerships as well, CTE courses, and then, of course, internships. What's pretty revealing about this data, and remember, we're talking about just the high school seniors that were going to school as seniors at Charles Page during this last school year. And truly, only 30% of our senior class, out of 409 seniors, graduates, only 30 did not complete a capstone. So that interprets into almost 93% completed some sort of capstone project. And I think setting the bar at about 50% completing a capstone, we were very pleasantly surprised at the number of students that actually stepped up and did those things. The nice part about the data as well is that some of them completed two things. So there were lots of students that maybe were in an internship opportunity, but also taking concurrent enrollment or CTE classes, or maybe going to Tulsa Tech, but also in AP. So it shows that our students were really taking advantage of the courses that we were developing and offering at Charles Page High School, and also lends itself to a plan of action for them once they graduate from college. So I love that data. I think when we look at how we measure progress in high school, I mean, it's great to look at the school report card, but you also have to dig a little bit deeper and think through what we're doing as a program with a combination of opportunities that we have for kids, and see how they're taking advantage of it. So I love those statistics. I think they were pretty revealing at the work that I think Charles Page High School team is doing right now to make sure kids are getting what they need. Go ahead.
If I can jump in there, one of the that's interesting about the report that Ms. Durkee shared is that that is current data that we're seeing from our seniors this year. And so if you look back at those reports that I was reflecting on just previously, like for instance, if you go back to the high school to college going rates, basically what you're looking at there is out of 403 graduates that graduated from Charles Page in 2017-18, actually 2017, 49% of those students entered college as freshmen the following fall semester. And I think that one of the things that we're going to see as a result of the data that she just shared with you is that more and more of our students are going to start to get plugged into what's necessary to complete a career path. I think we're going to see more kids possibly entering college as freshmen, whether it's at the community college level or the university level, because we're starting to expose them to more opportunities. And that's just the part of that ICAP experience, but it's a great deal of it is really can be pinned on our high school team of administrators that have worked so hard to plug students into those internship programs. So we're expecting the rates from those previous reports to go up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then lastly, CPHS did apply for a grant opportunity that will allow us to not just promote college entrance or post-secondary, but also look at intervention for kids who lag in essential skills like reading. And so they were able to secure almost $97,000 for the purpose of hiring an instructional coach and some curriculum for addressing reading deficiencies for interventions for students. So, I mean, I think globally as a high school program, you have to look at student need across the board. And all of these kind of play a role, not kind of, but do play a role in making sure we're giving students what they need for successful adult life. So they're doing some really great things at Charles Page across the district for sure, but just wanted to share some kind of end of the year data with what we're doing with our classes at Charles Page. Moving on, just gearing up for professional development in July, we actually initially had determined that we were going to try to capture 50% of our teachers, offered them a stipend in July for making sure we're solidifying the skill sets that we developed in April and May. But we kind of turned a corner and decided that we really needed to provide PD for every single teacher. So that's the design of what we're going to do in July, bring them back and pay a stipend for 2 half days of training to get ready and gear up for school in August. And when we know that we have a lot to look forward to when school starts up. A lot of planning, honestly, to make sure we're ready for really what's to happen as school starts. So we're gearing up, and Sean's done a lot of work, and his team, to make sure we're delivering the kind of professional development that we need to deliver to our teachers. So Sean, I don't know if you have a perspective about that, but done a great job.
Definitely. I have to say that with distance learning over the past semester, our teachers did a wonderful job making that transition from face-to-face to virtual, but we're going to work to help to provide them the skills and the tools that they need to integrate a lot of the things that we used as far as digital curriculum into the face-to-face classroom, so we can make it more of the culture of the classroom in the brick and mortar institution, as well as if we have to flip that switch and make a change back to virtual learning, you know, they'll have the tools that they need to make that happen more seamlessly and to communicate much more effectively with parents and students than we ever have.
Currently, we're starting to see an uptick in our virtual academy enrollment, as we expected we would. We are working toward making sure we're also developing that opportunity as a choice for all students pre-K through grade 12. Currently, we have 3 pre-K students that are enrolled in our virtual academy. And I think that there's, you know, opinions out there that would suggest that, you know, face-to-face is better. I'm not saying I would stray from that opinion. However, we also know that parents are making choices. And so we're trying to provide an environment that suits parents' needs. And in the current situation that we're in, we know that there's some hesitation and fear for some people to send their kids back to school. So at least in a face-to-face format, so we're trying hard to make sure that we're providing opportunities for students. I mentioned briefly, and we'll get to the policies later on in the agenda, but there are 4 that we're asking for direct approval tonight that will help us mitigate the current situation. Most of them are small changes, but virtual academy attendance is a big one. We've taken our online policy that was developed years ago when we went and started proposing virtual classes, but because of some current legislation, it allows for a lot more flexibility regarding attendance. So even with, say, maybe a short-term, the possibility of a short-term home isolation for, say, a student exposure to COVID, we actually could continue a distance learning platform, even short-term, to allow them to continue instruction but still get counted in attendance. So that's probably the biggest change that you'll see in policy tonight. But no, there are 4 that we're asking for approval as the first read tonight. So I think that concludes, Ms. Wagers, our discussion of curriculum and student empowerment, unless you guys have questions.
Are we ready to move on? Okay. Number 5, resource innovation.
Oh, I really didn't put a ton of time into notes. I think we all understand where state budgets are. We were able to access, we know we're taking what we were projecting to be a $1.5 million discrepancy from where we were last year in state aid. And we mitigated that to the best of our ability. We feel like at this point we could be dipping into our fund balance to some degree. We were able to access about $700 and almost $80,000 in CARES Act stimulus money, which is great. Most of that will be used for the purchase of Chromebook technology, hotspot availability, and a content management system, which interprets into curriculum that we can use for families that choose that type of learning. I know hotspots were a pretty big deal back in the spring semester when we were trying to go online for families, and right now we have about 500 on the order. So we think we'll be in a great position that if a full closure were to happen, we'll be ready. And then the other portion we'll be using for things like making sure that our custodial staff is funded, and that we know we're going to need sanitation, and then making sure that we're providing a health aid for each of our buildings to mitigate any kind of exposure or health sickness from students or staff that might happen as a result of startup. So And it's helpful, but I don't think it's going to get us out of the woods in terms of having to make sure we try to protect fund balance as much as we can, but knowing full well that there's a possibility we'll dip into it. So I don't know. I mean, I'll send you Vernon Florence's perspective in terms of general revenue. He's pretty quick about keeping us on target for what's to come. And we feel like, we just have to work the numbers and make sure that we're being respectful and frugal with the public's money. That's our purpose. So unless there's questions, we do have maybe a little bit of bond report. I know Mr. Bynum's on tonight, but Freshman Center is still right on schedule. They're starting this crazy, the punch list for the upstairs starting next week. Furniture, I believe, was partially delivered today. We're staging it in the library right now. And so it really is on schedule. I believe in a previous email, I gave you an update about bond projects. So the baseball and softball complex regrading is underway now. Pratt now has water in their teacher's lounge, and the Boyd windows are in the middle of installation at this point. Louvers were removed and all of that. So bond projects are going as planned. We're thinking the Angus Gym addition will be out for bid around September. They're working up construction documents right now. So things are going as scheduled pretty readily. We had a little problem with the Pratt playground facility over the 4th of July weekend. Had some folks that thought it would be great fun to light some fireworks in the tunnel on the playground equipment. And so we think there was a fire that smoldered for a couple hours, and then the fire department got called. So I know Mr. Bynum, you might want to address that a little bit. I know he's on it, kind of working through that. So Mike, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add.
Well, the good news is that there wasn't, in terms of the sheer area of it, there wasn't a lot that was involved. The damage that took place was in the center of the structure, so you really can't see it from the road. However, we will have to dig out some gravel. I'm sure we'll be talking to our insurance. Chances are we will not be able to get replacement pieces in time. So we'll probably end up hopefully being able to block off part of the structure, still allow the kids to use it whenever school starts.
Yeah. But it's unfortunate. I don't know that people do some silly things. And so that was one of them that wasn't super smart, but we'll handle it. The other thing I need to tell you is that we did have some hail damage on our roofs. I know we have an adjuster that has been out. I don't know that they're finished. Mike, do you have that information? It looks like we're going to have a little bit of a roof deductible and a couple of roof repairs in the district based on the hailstorm.
Given the sheer number of roofs and problems in the area, they're moving kind of slow. The good news we can put out is that at Clyde Boyd and Pratt, we did not have any damage to our HVAC systems that some labor won't fix. So we didn't have any large HVAC structural issues. They have done the roof inspection at Boyd and Pratt. Both locations at least partially have a metal roof, and those did take some damage. The adjuster has not completed his study yet, but he has kind of made mention and kind of hinted that it could be substantial in terms of the metal roof at those two schools. We still have yet to have Angus with its shingle roof inspected, and also limestone is going to have to be looked at. The good news is that limestone, like a lot of the Clyde Boyd, is the gravel based that is very hail damage resistant, and we weathered pretty good on those roofs.
So any questions? A little quick overview of finance and facilities. So love to answer questions if any of you guys have any.
Anybody? Are you ready for health and safety?
Well, actually, let's go to 6.
Oh, yes, that was, wasn't it?
Yeah, I really want to talk about this because graduation was a little bit of a trick to plan, honestly. And, we made some really hard decisions early on in June. and determined to have that outdoors. Honestly, it went off without a hitch. Those of you that were in attendance, thank you. It was a hot day, there is no doubt. And oh my goodness, I have to commend Church That Matters. Mr. Gunn pastors that church, as you all know, and contributed to their expertise and the ability to live stream, which was amazing. I think they brought out some equipment and had their staff on site the entire day, and it was hot, I can promise you. So much thanks to Church That Matters and Rusty Gunn for sure. Olivet Baptist provided water, so they brought in water for participants and attendees, which I for one was extremely grateful for. And then lots of really positive feedback from parents who were extremely grateful that the students got to celebrate in a formal way. And so we finally got closure, I think, on the 2020 school year in a good way. Also been implementing weekly dialogue meetings, trying to communicate with the community on just planning for next year. Our first one was about communication. We had, I think, 569 views. This was when I checked last week. Virtual Academy, last Tuesday, I had Jay Rodert on, talked about all the opportunities that we have with our virtual school. Just so you know, we did a little bit of we spruced it up. We painted the media center at the freshman center, same color as the high school, and hung some artwork, cleaned it up a lot. And it really does look like a very appealing space for our folks that are going to attend the academy. So I'm pretty proud of that work. So for the rest of the summer, every Tuesday night, we're going live stream on YouTube, trying to allow people to see us as people and literally talk about what's going on for the new school year. Tomorrow night, we'll be talking about our Early Childhood Education Center. As you know, we named our new principal, Ms. Morgan Douglas. She was a teacher that it's been up and coming as an administrator for a while now. She's at Angus Valley. So she has taken the helm, and she is excited about the possibilities for that building. And then next week, we'll be going over our reentry guidance for the 2020-21 school year regarding our health and school opening. So that's next Tuesday night at 7. So we're encouraging people to get on, take a peek, even if you can't see it that night. They're saved on our YouTube channel. It's called Sandite Learning, and anyone can watch it later. So I was a little nervous about doing that, quite frankly, and it went okay the first night. So we're going to continue at least until school starts, and then probably open up some live streams periodically after school starts as well. So I feel like from here until the end of next school year, there's going to be a lot of communication that's going to have to go out to keep people updated on the status of things in general. So that does conclude communication, unless you guys have questions.
I'll just say real quickly, on graduation, I think obviously in evaluation, there would probably be some things you would certainly do differently, but ultimately just pulling it together the way they had to and making the best of difficult situations. I want to say great job to everyone who was involved in that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gunn. They worked really hard. And so I appreciate that. It was a tough decision. Everybody likes the formal graduation at ORU, and when we shifted, I think people were grateful, but it was a little bit of work. So took a team coming together for sure.
Just got a question, Sherry. So far, we're still good with the calendar that we have right now?
That's my intention. I know there's other districts that are pulling some different kinds of strategies. Here's my thought on that. Well, yes, to answer your question, short answer is yes. We're intending to start up August 18th, as we've told the public that we will. There are others that are planning virtual learning days to try to implement a little bit of maybe not practice, but really try to implement that so they can hone their skills. We've been inside Google Classroom for some time now, and I'm not saying it was perfect, because there is definitely room for improvement in the spring, but I do think that we're in a better place. And I do think that with professional development, what our teachers learned and what we're prepared to solidify in July will make us ready for what's to come. And so we have some really ramped up strategies prepared. We've been very clear about the implementation of new standards, student expectations for work completion. It won't be like the spring where we were just trying to maintain. We're literally expecting student progress. And so, you know, my intuition, I think our intuition is the more we can have them face-to-face up front, the better off we are. And I do think that, I think the feedback we heard from parents as we looked at just some communication we're putting out on social media, but also our surveys, people were pretty clear about wanting kids to be in school. And so that's what we're doing. I think over time, this is my prediction, so I'll definitely eat crow and say I'm wrong if I'm wrong when it all pans out. But I think the ability to mitigate exposures or COVID cases that arise, we mitigate them much like we would any other quote unquote emergency that would arise. And so we're going to take one day at a time. What we're finding out about student exposure and the tendency for especially our younger students to be asymptomatic lends itself to having school. And I don't know, I did share a document with you earlier. It was the American Academy of Pediatrics that came up with a very strong position paper on the benefits of students being in school and really weighing those benefits against what's happening with the pandemic. And so I feel good about where we're at. I think it took us a good, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks to, as a team, get our mind wrapped around what our guidelines will be. I'll be talking a little bit about that in the next item. But we are having a committee meeting tomorrow to talk about those guidelines. And I think that we're in a good place. And I think that's what the public expects us to do. And so we're going for it and we'll mitigate as necessary.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Ms. Wagner, that really does take us to item 7.
Okay,
If
we
you're
can do
ready for that.
health and safety.
Yeah, right. And so I want to talk a bit about the draft strategies. We're calling them strategies for startup for 2020-21. And I want to briefly talk about how we've set up our guidance. Again, we have a full committee meeting tomorrow morning. We've invited, I know Mr. Gunn's going to participate in our meeting in the morning. We've invited some teachers, some parents, and then our core team of, I believe there were 8 of us that partook. Carrie Slady was on, she sat on that committee along with Kristen and Sean Beard. But really we separated into categories. We started with employees, and our guidance for employees are pretty close to what we were using this summer as we had our 12-month employees on staff, and they're on staff now. And then we went straight to operations. In other words, how was the building going to be opened up and what were the expectations for the context of students in the buildings? And then we shifted to students, health. And then the last section is really about nurse protocol, which it won't be quite as important maybe to our patrons and parents, but really important for how we handle mitigating COVID exposures or COVID cases as they come throughout the year. So, I mean, essentially, you know, we're going to be making sure our adults are taking their temperature before coming to work. We're going to be providing a log to keep track, practicing the CDC guidelines regarding how long you should be fever-free depending on the kind of exposure you have. So if you're just symptomatic with no exposure to COVID, then obviously we're recommending 24 hours fever-free without medication for people. You get into an employee close contact or near contact, and we'll talk through that a little bit more in detail. We're going to be providing masks for all of our teachers, or actually all employees as they come back to school. We're making them strongly recommended but not mandatory. They could be required based on employee exposure, and that's really outlined in detail in the guidance. Some of our staff are going to have to partake in building operations in terms of cleaning frequently touched surfaces. So that's going to be a little bit different. I don't know that we can rely on our custodial staff to do all of it and do those properly the way we need to. We've learned a lot about what exposure means. And so employee with COVID-like symptoms, but no known exposures may not entail that they have COVID. And so we would ask them to stay home until they're fever-free for 24 hours without medicine. But we really broke down known exposure and we defined it in our guidance. So there's a difference between near contact and close contact, meaning I can sit across the room from someone who has COVID, but not be within 6 feet or around them for longer than 15 minutes. And the likelihood of me contracting that is pretty small. And so we have guidance surrounding a near contact versus a close contact, meaning I have been within 6 feet for longer than 15 minutes with someone that has a confirmed case. And so there's structures around that. Folks that have the infection and have been tested positive, then we're asking for 3 days or 72 hours that have passed since fever without fever reducing medicines and other symptoms have shown improvement. And then we want at least 10 days passed before symptoms first appeared. All of this is really in adherence to what CDC is recommending. Travel, we're just saying case by case basis. We know that pretty much across all states that the different states are implementing different guidelines, and so we're really going to work with our employees about case to case. And then I'm asking them to contact our office if they have tested positive at any time, mostly because we're working straight up with the Tulsa County Health Department to get guidance for procedures and the what to do. And
Sure. How will any of those things affect the teacher's sick days, allowed sick days? Like,
right.
I mean, if it's not, they're not sick, but they've been exposed directly, whatever, they have to take those many days. Is that counts against their sick days every time?
We're working through that, Rusty. And here's the thing: if it's we have mandated and asked them to stay at home, no, because here's what we're thinking through. There could be a possibility, and it's case by case. So to say specifically this applies to every single case would be hard. So there could be cases where an adult would be positive, would have tested positive, that would need home isolation, but would be entirely capable of working. And so literally you could be, just much like we've done for our employees all summer, you could be working from home. We talked through a possibility of having a teacher in our SSPS meeting earlier, a teacher who's asymptomatic but tests positive could be remotely doing their classes through Google Meet with a person in the room to moderate behavior, but the teacher is actually delivering instruction on a screen. So we're talking through all possible scenarios. Now, if the employee's sick and symptomatic and I've got respiratory and I'm running a fever, then that's sick leave. I mean, they're sick. But I think that there's going to be times where we would have a positive case with an asymptomatic person, much like a student could be at home in self-quarantine that would be asymptomatic, that also could produce work and learn. So I think we've learned a lot about how to handle it. Of course, we know that we're going to have employees that fall in those high-risk groups. And again, we're going to have to take those one by one. I will say that it would not be any different than we experienced with our child nutrition folks who really need a gold medal of honor for continuing to feed during April and May and even into June, through the end of June, that worked whether they were in that high risk category or not. Many of them did. And I should knock on some wood, but truly, we didn't have one single person that was referred, maybe showing a few symptoms that were COVID-like, that came back with a positive test. Now, that's going to happen. We can't deny the fact that we're probably going to have someone that tests COVID positive. But I will say we've learned some strategies to mitigate it so we make good decisions based on the what's going on under the circumstances that we're in. So our guidance will provide that, but we're definitely also aware that we're going to have to make sure we're making the best decisions given the circumstances.
Do we have an idea of how many teachers like this situation would impact, where they have a spouse or someone living in their home who works in the healthcare industry, or nursing homes or things like that, where they're exposed ultimately every day.
Yeah, I don't have a good gauge. They'd have to self-report, honestly, and we haven't asked for that data. We do know a little bit about how many of our employees would be compromised just via their age or health. It's a pretty low number, honestly. But again, I do know we had an instance in the spring semester prior to school closure where we had one of our teachers that had exposure from her husband, honestly, and she ended up isolating at home, but then tested negative. That's why it's a little bit tricky to say this is the standard. I can tell you a story about a colleague of mine who tested positive with symptoms that he didn't really identify as COVID, but was in a household with his wife and daughter for 3 weeks before he finally went and had a test run, not because he was running even, and was positive, but neither one contracted the illness. So it's just, I think one employee at a time, as the same with students, one student at a time. We know there's risk, definitely, but we just have to play the circumstances and the data that we have at the time. Let's see, moving on down, the students' guidance will be a lot like, in terms of health, a lot like the employees in terms of how we handle it. Under the section for operation guidelines, we're going to try really hard to ask our community for some help with bus transportation. In other words, if you have the ability to bring your child to school, it would really help if you could deliver that. I mean, to the extent feasible with weather, the windows will be open and we're going to be sanitizing after each route. Likely our drivers will have masks on. We're kind of in this conundrum about, do we ask the students to wear masks? I've been able to link to the county. We think there's going to be a source for the blue paper masks for us to be able to provide. Some for students upon entering the bus. At the same time, we also don't want to deter students from coming to school. So the bus is a little bit of a tricky one. Physical building guidance, things like desks will face the same direction versus what we like to do, and that's put students in collaborative groups. We're going to be sanitizing restrooms more frequently, trying to take those breaks in small groups, to the extent possible, minimizing large groups. So the idea of big assemblies are going to be pretty few and far between, just to keep people apart. Elementary students are going to really kind of be in their homeroom classrooms more so than maybe what they were trying not to commingle them. So they go eat in the cafeteria as a group, they leave the cafeteria, and then the tables get disinfected. So a lot of those small little nuances we have in the guidance, and then as a leadership team, we've been talking through how that works. Part of our COVID money was used to spend on some products. I know Mr. Bynum was able to find large buckets, for lack of a better word, of wipes to the tune of 1,000 per unit, and every teacher's classroom will have one. So we'll have availability of disinfecting wipes to wipe off frequently touched items like light switches, computer keyboards. We're going to ask the students, to the extent possible, not to share supplies. So go back to the pencil boxes where you have your name on them and you're using your own markers and crayons, and not sharing those like we like to do. Gosh.
Can I pause you again? And I'm sorry, I'm like full of questions tonight. So, and this may be back to resource innovation to some degree, but also I think related to this. And you said something about buses, and that's what made me think of this. Did I see there's some change in bus routes and times and things like that? So
yeah, in an effort to try to minimize riders, we looked at the possibility. We haven't made a full decision. I'm really, it's hard because you want to get kids to school, but this idea of making sure that we're enforcing our walk distance. And so we can extend it up to 1.5 miles. We don't want to do that, because when you do that, say at Limestone, you end up crossing 97, which is a bad decision. So Our standard in the district is 1 mile walk zone for kids to access bus transportation. The truth is, in our district, we've been very lenient with that, and we pick them up as close as, across the neighborhood across from Charles Page High School, meaning that they're not having to cross Adams Road. So really trying to be cognizant of student safety while at the same time trying to reduce the number of riders per bus. So that's been a conversation. We have not landed on extending those that walk distance yet. I want to see Parker's in the middle of doing some work about how many families that affects, and we want to make sure that we're getting kids to school because we have a lot of families that rely on it.
I know we've, did some adjustment a few years ago and that's why we the staggered times and all of those things and reducing bus drivers. And some of that was done specifically in a lean financial time, obviously.
Right.
And those decisions were made. And I know we're still adhering to most of that. Is there any discussion about kind of loosening that a little bit? I know that like buses that go all the way to Johns Inc. up in that area way north, and they come back to Clyde Boyd, and so those students are sitting there for 30 and 45 minutes waiting after school, which means also we have teachers on duty for that long having to supervise those kids there during that time. And especially if we're being careful with COVID things, is that a concern?
We're adjusting our times a little bit in elementary. We haven't defined it exactly, and we're going to be putting that out. But the truth is, we're trying to equalize the instructional minutes for our elementary and secondary. And the idea is, in a full closure, we want to make sure that we can still meet the requirements for instructional minutes. So that was the idea between increasing the instructional day for elementary. We looked at a 3-tier bus system. Honestly, everything in the guidance says feasible and practical and appropriate. And when you 3-tier a system, what you do is you increase your cost, because in an attempt to reduce the number of riders, approaching a 3-tier system, number one, drastically changes the start and stop times, and it's pretty pricey. And just needing a crew of bus drivers, we struggle getting the number of drivers that we need just to run the routes that we have. So I don't foresee a huge change in bus routes at this point, unless Sean Parker comes with a decent plan. Yeah.
The 3-tier system, is that like a triple-decker bus that we're looking at? Or?
They don't have those. I don't know if they have them, that might be possible, but no, a triple tier would be literally 3 different bus times. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, it's expensive, and I don't know that it's feasible. And I think it would increase the wait time at, say, Clyde Boyd for the bus route to get there to pick up kids. So, I mean, that's something we really do not want to do, for sure. Buses are that's one of the hardest parts, honestly. Knowing that schools provide it, it really is not necessarily mandatory, but it's important to get kids to school. And so there's definitely a balance. So we can talk about that in our committee meeting tomorrow. Sean Parker will definitely be in attendance tomorrow morning.
What about lunches?
Lunch
Do
in
they
it.
eat for lunch in the classroom or in the cafeteria?
Well, we think if we manipulate the times and reduce the number, we think we get at the elementary level, we think it'll be pretty easy to have them in the cafeteria for lunch. At the secondary, it's going to be tricky. So we're going to try to reduce it as much as we can. In our guidance, we're talking 250 maximum. The secondary is tough. Middle school is the toughest. Charles Page High School, our seniors and juniors are off campus, and we also have 2 different eating areas. So at Charles Page High School, lunch shouldn't be as big of a problem. I think middle school is going to be the trick. And the idea is you create more lunch periods so that you reduce the number in the cafeteria at the same time.
Any chance that we relax the sophomores just to reduce for 1 year, just to reduce the people in the cafeteria?
That would, but really we haven't talked about it, but we could make that a point of discussion. So that's not outside the realm of possibility. Truly, there's not, I asked that question. Our cafeteria holds like 400 kids or 400 people. And so there's if with 2 lunches, you can probably social distance. And then there's other nooks and crannies that, like, there's the bistro area in the auditorium. I don't know. I'll bring that up as a
But we
point
took out the outside, correct?
well, we did, but we also have now just added an area in the new lobby that's outside that would be available for students to eat. So,
Okay. And if I understand correctly, the 9th grade kids are not going to be eating lunch with any of the other
correct,
10th, 11th, and 12th, right?
correct.
Okay.
They have their own space.
Sure.
My first reaction is, and if this way it's decided to go, it's fine with me. But I'll just say, if you do it for 1 year for those sophomores, I don't think you can bring it back.
No, I'm with you.
Oh,
on that.
yeah, we can. We took it away the first time. So.
What was the question? Do what with
So
sophomores?
we used to be total open campus
Oh.
for Charles Page, and when we built the new remodeled the cafeteria, we closed lunch for sophomores. It was based on a lot of data. They're not super great drivers at the high school. Some of them are, but not all. And so
I was trying to help you, Bo. Bo was going to be a hero if we just went with the let the
Thank
sophomores
you.
go off campus. But now he had to rein it back in and say, "Oh, we can take it away."
I got you. Say, listen, we're all heroes.
Well, Miss President should know the situation already, but I mean, come on.
She
That's a
wasn't-
low blow.
That's funny. Yeah, it's the big places. We won't be having full assemblies. That we're kind of thinking through. I know Mr. Trout's pretty good at being creative, but the Veterans Day assembly will probably have to be, if we have it, 2 parts versus 1. The doobie holds more than the auditorium. I mean, just we really, in our guidance, you'll see where we really have reduced large group assemblies to the extent possible. And truly, if people want us back in school, and we were talking through this with a group of superintendents a couple weeks ago, if our desire is to have kids back in school, then we're going to have to utilize some strategies to make sure we're, to the biggest degree we can, make people safe. And so something's got to give a little bit. I mean, we're going to have to put mechanisms in place, like parent drop off for elementary students. We're going to not allow parents to walk their kids in, because the more people in the building, the more you open yourself up for infectious illnesses. And so that's not going to be something that's going to be super popular, but in the name of, if we want to have school, we have to put some strategies in place that help us keep our people safe, students and adults alike. So, yeah, I think I hit the high points unless you have specific questions about it. And again, we're going to do large committee meeting tomorrow morning, and then the idea is to relay that to the public next week.
I appreciate what you put together. I'm thankful for Whitney and Rusty being on the committee to help push this thing forward. And there's still thousands of questions, and there'll be a lot of ifs and whats and what do we do type thing. But what you've got is kind of the summary or the initial plan set out, and there can be addendums to it as we go along. We'll have to be very flexible with it and stuff.
It changed
I appreciate
today.
it.
Yeah, it changed today. And so
So just real quick, Sherry,
you bet.
go ahead. What's the thought with the Tulsa Tech, with our schedule and seeing Tulsa's schedule so much different? And I have not heard what the other Tulsa County districts are doing, but do we see any concern that we may be doing something different than what everybody else is doing? Not that
I don't
we
think
need to,
so.
because we're our own school district.
Yeah,
Connected with Tulsa Tech as well.
Yeah, I don't think so. I do know Tulsa Community College is doing some online classes. I'm not worried about it. Our students are pretty astute that are partaking of concurrent enrollment, and so that could happen. But when we were thinking about Charles Page High School, we have a lot of kids off campus anyway, doing all kinds of things. And so I don't perceive that to be a problem. I don't think we can ever say anything's going to be flawless. So there could be some obstacles that come in the way that we hadn't thought about. But Tulsa Tech's always been a really great partner. And I suspect that will continue in light of all of this. Mr. Franklin can tell you some stories. That's for sure, because they're hard at it right now. So.
Okay. Does that wrap up number 7?
I think that wraps up number 7, unless you guys have questions about that.
Any more questions? Okay, moving on to consent agenda.
So just a couple items I want to bring to your attention. None of this is really new, but something you really see about once a year. Item number 20 is an agreement with KLK Holdings for the use of our logo. So they're a company out of, I believe, Iowa that will, we have to upgrade the agreement. As you know, it's trademarked. And so to use the logo, we charge a small fee, percentage of their sales. And so that's what that's about. 23 through 26 are all agreements we have with CAP regarding operations, the child nutrition, LEA agreement regarding special education services. But those are items that you see every year on the consent agenda as we continue that partnership. 28 is an item that illustrates that we're using the ACT in the spring of 21 for eligible juniors for state testing. Right now, we're planning as if testing is going to occur. I know there is an idea out there that maybe we're going to ask as a state for a waiver, much like we did this spring. So I'm not sure how that's going to unfold. But in the meantime, ACT will be our college entrance test for juniors by choice. 31 is approval of Dayspring Villa 3-year cooperative service agreement that comes around every 3 years. Just knowing that we provide services to those folks that would partake in that service in our community. And I think that would be the ones that I need to bring to your attention.
Any questions?
I would have a question about just kind of clarification on item 12, the fishing club. It sounds to me like they're asking to be made kind of an official sport of the school. I didn't quite understand the response.
Oh, gotcha. So yeah, so anytime we have a new club that would like to raise money, it has to be board approved. So thank you for bringing that to my attention to bring up. And so we have never utilized that as an approved club that would actually be able to raise money to pay for the activity. And so it's grown pretty substantially over the last 4 years, as you see in the letter. And they want to be sanctioned as a club off campus or to participate in tournaments. As they're saying, is OSSAA regulated. Personally, I feel like we have interest with students across the board in areas that they show interest. I think this is a great one, but it takes board approval. So thank you for bringing that up. I should have highlighted that one as well.
So it's just a club. It's not an actual sport, I guess. I don't know how that.
School sport.
They have regular tournaments. They actually do meet monthly. And so tournaments are OSSAA regulated. So it depends on how you view sports. Cheer is also a sport, by the way. Whether you think so or not, it's also OSSAA. So it's just another way for people to compete. I don't know if you have heard of Chad Warren. He was a graduate in 2009, and he's literally very successful professional fisherman. And so this has been something that our students have enjoyed. You know, we have a shooting club too, by the way, that participates in tournaments at various places as well, and they're pretty successful too.
Okay, glad you brought that up because I was going to tell you that earlier. Later on, but the shooting team did go to the Oklahoma Cattlemen's fundraiser, and the 4 guys actually won the tournament on the course, but they got beat out by the other team buying broken clays. So
there you go.
Like mulligans in golf, they bought mulligans. Mr. Evans would not allow our team to buy any. So the second year in a row, our team did not win because of that fact.
Hey, I heard that story actually from Mr. Evans. He said they needed to win on
Yes.
their own without the help of, you know,
Well, so next year, we're behind them anyway. It doesn't matter.
that's hilarious. Any other questions, Rusty, about that?
I think that's all.
Thank you for
Okay.
bringing it to our attention.
Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda items as listed.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Vote, please.
Gunn,
Aye.
Mullins,
Aye.
Noggle,
Aye.
Wagner,
Aye.
Wagers.
Aye. Okay, on to action items. First up is proposed executive session to discuss employment. Anyone? Okay. Number 39, proposed employment.
I'll make the motion for the proposed employment of the following positions and individuals.
Second.
Motion and second. Can we vote, please?
Gunn,
Aye.
Mullins,
Aye.
Noggle,
Aye.
Wagner,
Aye.
Wagers.
Aye. Okay. Number 40.
Yeah. So 40 and 41, and I'll defer to Greg to answer those questions, but this has to do with sublease. Greg, you want to speak to that?
Sure. 40 is the sublease with TCIA on Northwoods. 41 is the sublease with TCIA again on the ninth grade center, where we basically lease them our land so that they can build our building that we can pay them for. Basically how that works. So in a nutshell.
This is something that's on the board agenda every single year as an approval item. The new one is the sublease for the new freshman center. So you'll start seeing that yearly as well.
I say number 40 is for Northwoods and 41 is now the ninth grade center.
Okay.
Madam
we have
Chairman,
an-
I'll make a motion, we approve item number 40, which is to approve the renewal of the sublease agreement for the Northwoods Fine Arts Gathering.
A second.
Second.
Okay. Can we vote?
Gunn,
Aye.
Mullins,
Aye.
Noggle,
Aye.
Wagner,
Aye.
Wagers.
Aye. And number 41 for the ninth
I'll
grade.
make that motion, read one also, just like 40 to approve the sublease agreement for the ninth grade center.
A second.
Second. Second.
Who seconded?
I did.
Okay.
A vote, please.
Gunn,
Aye.
Mullins,
Aye.
Noggle,
Aye.
Wagner,
Aye.
Wagers.
Aye. Number 42, proposed approval of child nutrition department increase of meal pricing for the 2021 school year.
Yeah, I may let Greg kind of talk about this one too. We have been well below the federal expectation for food prices for some time now in attempt to keep them manageable. Greg, I'm going to let you speak to it if you don't
Okay,
mind.
just very quickly, we watched a declining fund balance in the child nutrition over the last 3-4 years. Sherry Pierce has tried very hard to keep prices down, but we increased salaries drastically or dramatically for our school district over the last 2 to 3 years. And so that has turned her red in her carryover on her fund balance. So she's eaten into her fund balance somewhat. And I kind of mandated that to ensure a healthy fund balance within the child nutrition department, that she had to raise our prices. We did some analysis, and came up with some prices. Hopefully that will bring her back to where she's at a break-even point, hopefully. Of course, that all depends on what happens with COVID and stuff, because COVID hit her hard, because she lost all of her funding sources basically that she was receiving from parents that were paying for kids' lunches. That just sort of dried up and disappeared right after the spring break went away. So she saw another healthy bite out of her fund balance from that. So we're just trying to ensure that the fund balance stays healthy within the child nutrition division, and that we don't have to fund it out of Fund 11. No play on words intended.
Which is our general fund.
Huh?
Which is our general fund. That's a federally
Right.
funded program. Yeah.
Yeah, so we try to keep the child nutrition where it's self-sustaining, and this is the increases will help ensure that going forward. We may see an increase again next year. I don't know. We'll have to kind of see how it plays out this year with everything that goes on, which is anybody's guess at this point.
Thank you, Greg.
Most part, salaries of the child nutrition workers are out of this particular fund as well, or do we take them out of the general fund?
So we try to make sure that that fund self-supports, Mike. And so what she makes in federal reimbursements and then parent pay, the idea is to keep that flat to the greatest extent possible. And it has not been that way for the last few years. And really, it's a noble attempt, honestly, to keep our prices lower. But at the same time, we're hoping that program supports itself.
We try to ensure that not only does it pay salaries, but it also pays for the equipment that's needed as much as humanly possible. So it's kind of been the goal. Hasn't always been achieved, but it's always been the goal or the stretch that we try to reach with it.
Any more questions?
I'd be curious to see how, what the approximate dollar amount was that was affected by the kids not being in school. I mean, I know you've had to do research on that, but I can see how that would certainly affect that, and the rising prices of the rising food prices also.
I can get that number. I can get that number for you, Jackie, later this week. I'll get with Sherry Pearson and have her calculate. We can give you an approximation. It won't be an exact dollar amount, obviously.
Right.
But
this was basically March, April, May.
Right.
yes, there was a significant loss from the March, April, and May. The disappearance of, like my kid who would have parent paid. So all those disappeared. And so I saw a significant downturn in the amount of revenues as opposed to the expenses.
Yeah.
And so I can get you a number next day or so. I will get with Sherry Pearson and see if we can calculate something, give you kind of a
Estimate.
a nice little spreadsheet or something on it.
We love spreadsheets.
No problem.
Some of you love spreadsheets.
Greg and I love spreadsheets.
Okay. Do you have a motion for increasing meal pricing, child nutrition department? Number 42.
I make a motion. We approve that item 42.
And a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. A vote, please.
Gunn,
Aye.
Mullins,
Aye.
Noggle,
All right.
Wagnon,
Aye.
Wagers.
Aye. Number 43, proposed approval of appointments for Terry and Lori.
And these are really Lori's, the new hire. You know that Lynn Graves retired this year, and her last day was the 31st of July. While I was very sad to see her go, there's no doubt she provided some amazing dedication and service to our district over the course of time. We are proud that we were able to onboard Lori Hopkins. She's been amazing as well. So Terry Kennedy is now our encumbrance clerk, and then Lori Hopkins will serve as our assistant treasurer and also be in charge of activity funds too, and that requires an oath of office. So we just ask you to approve those two.
Do you have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the appointments of Terry Kennedy, encumbrance clerk, and Rory Hopkins, assistant treasurer.
A second?
Second.
Okay, vote, please.
Gunn,
Aye.
Mullins,
Aye.
Noggle,
Aye.
Wagner,
Aye.
Wagers.
Aye. And number 44, proposed approval of policy revisions.
So these are the policy revisions that I spoke of earlier. The first one's regarding school closure with a little bit of language regarding extenuating circumstances that includes a health crisis. Who knew? And then DECA is about Family Medical Leave Act. And I'm going to let Kristen kind of go over the middle two. Kristen, if you don't mind, talking about family first and then DKA.
So just really first on the DECA, which was B on the agenda, it just has a little bit of general language in regard to health circumstances. It doesn't specifically outline family first medical leave, but any changes that are made to FMLA, if you kind of read that, I kept it general because I didn't know where all this is going to go and what's going to come down the pike and what they might add to it. So I kept it general, which just means that we're going to follow, whatever we're told to do in that instance. So it's funny that went on the agenda, and I got something from another a firm today that are saying these are things you need to address, and ours was on the agenda today. So I was happy about that.
That's good.
So just strengthens what we have and make sure that we're going to follow what we need to in these fun times. So you guys love spreadsheets, and apparently I'm going to love case by case figuring out Family Medical Leave Act and Family First. But it's going to be good. So the last one, C is DKA, had to do with vacancies, transfers, and assignments. And just a little bit about that. That policy was seriously outdated. It talked about posting things on the bulletin board, and during the summer we were going to post them on the bulletin board. So we haven't done that for a long time. So it was time for an update. There are some reports that have came about from the State Department and through federal government since we had that policy, and those had to do with comparability, which in turn has to do with employees that we have at one site versus another to kind of keep that equality and make sure that we don't have all our experienced teachers at one place, or that we just keep even. Also, there's supplement and not supplant and some other things, maintenance of effort, and they all kind of fall together. And so with that, when we looked at that language, and Mr. Watts went through that with us, and Ms. Durkee, and we worked at one time, and then we kind of put that aside, went back and thought about it again, and we thought we could work with what we had because there was some good stuff in there. But the main changes that we made were really to best meet our needs that we need for districts or departments or programming, because according to the policy, we didn't have that availability to kind of move people where we needed to. And based on what we're facing now, we just don't know if we're going to have, we might have to move somebody, but we want to keep our people. The other part of that, I'm sorry, Ms.
No, I was just going to say one of the conversations we had with SSCA is really the development of our virtual academy. And what has happened now is we have, of course, Mr. Roeder, who's our director, but we've also manned that with Casey Yateman, who's a certified secondary English teacher and also a special education teacher to help manage caseload. Of course, we'd ask for volunteers first, but we also need to make sure that we do show equity in regard to experience by site. But really, we're talking about the potential need for virtual academy teacher based on an uptick in enrollment. And it may not be the case. I could be wrong about having the kind of enrollment that would require an elementary certified teacher to play that part solely, but I want to be prepared in case we have to move there when school starts.
And that language also came for programs, if we move a specific program somewhere, and it's really kind of always been that way in regard to like special ed or a department. And so it just kind of strengthened that language if we had a need where we did need to. Also, the posting went from 10 days to 5 days, and a lot of people kind of scratch their head like, why would you change it to 5? And there's just times, especially this time of year, where we're looking for teachers, and it doesn't mean that we can't take 10. It just means it has to be posted for at least 5 because people have signed contracts with other districts and they might not want to let them out. Instead of kind of fighting that battle, it gives us the opportunity to try to have those people come on board a little sooner, maybe let another district know. We face that on the opposite end too. And so it just gives us a little more leeway to be able to get quality people that aren't truly roped into their contract. They might let them out after that June, I think it's June 15th date, because after that, you're an employee's pretty much roped in, but sometimes we all have a little bit of swapping that goes on, and it just shortens it than us sitting and waiting for it to be posted for a full 10 days. We don't want to lose anybody good. And then the other part, you know, I talked about Word that's on the district website, which connects to our talent ed. I didn't list this specific program because that could always change. And then number 5, we put some language in there about our evaluation tool when it comes to looking at transfers or approving that. And we just felt that was important because according to the State Department, that's one of the key things that you'll look at now is the overall evaluation tool on teachers. It's just not about years of service. It also goes to that. So we added a little bit of language to that. And I haven't had a chance to talk to Ms. Durkee about this, but I was looking in this in this approval and revisions, and also on DKA, if you look at the second page under the teacher initiative transfer, and I apologize, I just caught this on number 3, it talks about that you have, I believe it says 10 days of the initial posting, but and it's not striked out in your language, but it really needs to read 3 days of the initial posting. And then it says that the employee would be notified if they didn't receive the transfer. I think it says in 5 days, but it should be just shall be notified of the filling of the position. And the reason why is because at Sand Springs Public Schools, if somebody within the district applies for a position, we always want them to have that opportunity for an interview. And so when it goes up, we want to give them that opportunity and make sure that we get them interviewed. In the system, if Sherry Durkee applied for a position, it doesn't say that she works for Sand Springs Public Schools. And if you didn't know a teacher from another district, you physically have to go in and look at all of them and see if they work for our district. That gives our principals, administrators, whoever, a chance to look through the list, click on them, take that time, see if they're from Sand Springs and interview them. And then in turn, we always call people back, but this says that the principal or administrator shall, or that the teacher that applied shall be notified of the filling of the position. And we do that anyway, but it's just common courtesy to call. If you had an interview, you made it to an interview, that you were informed of the changes. And that change was not in there under number 3 when I went and looked today. So I just caught it like right when we were in the meeting.
So, Kristen, is that
Makes sense, Ms.
well,
Durkee?
required by law? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you look on page 2 of that, if you click on the document DKA, you go to page 2 on the second page, find where it says it says enter teacher initiated transfer.
Yeah, I see it. I'm just saying.
Yeah, number 3.
Um,
But you see where it says 10 days?
right, but yes.
Because it's no longer posted 10 days.
I see what you're saying. We've reduced it because of the requirement by law. I understand.
So it's no longer posted for 10, so you can't do that. And then they will be notified, but if we cut it to 3, we can't go to, I mean, it can't sit for 5 more days. So
in short, basically, we always grant interviews to anyone in the district that's qualified for a position that would apply. It's just number 1, courtesy. And secondly, I like to entertain the idea of people that want to move up in our organization, given the opportunity to interview. And so we always do that. And then what she's saying is because by law, we only have to post it 5 days. That doesn't match, is what she's saying. Mike, I think you had a question.
Just one question on that. You say we always grant an interview, but Kristen, you said the principal that's doing the interviewing or administrator may not know if that is a Sand Springs employee or not. Do we have somebody that's checking that? Because if the person doesn't know who they all are, which it'd be hard to do anyway. We might need somebody that's checking that to make sure that we do abide by this statement.
We do, Mike. That's why I said within the system, when they apply, there's it's a little document that we click on, and we go through them all because we kind of color code them when we go through the system. So they just click on it, and you can click that their last place they worked was Sand Springs, Garfield, or whatever. So principals go through that whole list. What happens is if it's been posted for 15 days or whatever, and they've made their choice on the 10th day, then and they've submitted that to me, then they don't look anymore after that amount of time. But if we reduce to that, also helps us to make sure we are reaching everybody within that 5-day period. And they go back and look periodically if they're still looking. But trust me, when we hire teachers, we're going through all of them to find the best fit. And there's a form also that can be submitted that they can click on, that they send to me, and then I identify them and send them to the principals too. I've had that happen.
Has this been presented to the Teachers Association yet?
We talked through it today. Really, yes, we talked through it today. Not specifically with the reduction of days, for sure, but with the idea of looking at a need to reassign employees specifically regarding virtual academy. The problem with the 10-day rule is if we've already made a decision and that posting is left up, then people will still apply. And so then you get more applicants and you've already made a decision. So I know the law was changed so that there was only a requirement for 5 days where it was 10, because we don't go through the bulletin boards and the actual physical posting. It's all digital and electronic now. So, I mean, we really want to give our people the opportunity to, and very rarely would we miss one, because we're looking at those applications when they come in.
Well, and just so the board knows, of course, you guys always have the final approval, which is on the list. And so at that point, you're making the final approval. According to the language too, the posting stays up until it's approved. At this point, kind of what happens is I just put it as non-active for that moment, which kind of makes it on pause. And then I run them through as a new hire, and then it goes to the board agenda and you all approve it. So I haven't put that it's filled until you've approved, even though they might have been in and filled out paperwork. Then you all approve, then I mark it as filled. This way it just kind of speeds the process up, and it doesn't have it still posting sitting out there and people are applying thinking the position's still open for that entire time. But the final decision lies with the board. I feel like the shadow. I'm sorry, I have the worst light ever.
You're outside. I can tell you're
I know.
like, I wish I was there.
Any other questions? I'm sorry for that little bit, guys, that didn't get caught, but I just want to make sure we get it right.
Well, so we need to make that statement, or we can approve in August, one of the two. I feel like the August board meeting might be a little bit late. If we could make that approval, that would be helpful, because I think we're going to have to make some decisions regarding virtual prior to. We can still do that. I just think it helps to have policy. Moving on to online instruction. This is the one that has a little bit more to it. I know Sean's still on there, but I want to take you through the policy myself. This policy was first approved when legislation determined that every school district should offer online learning. So what has happened to programs over time is they've morphed into something bigger than I think initially what they were structured for. Our goal in this policy was to make sure we were incredibly clear about all those choices that people have. And so one of the things we wanted to make sure people understood is what full-time virtual learning was versus a blended model versus distance. So you see we added a lot of language regarding those three strategies. And then we also wanted to make sure we were giving you student definitions. And when you look through the second page where it breaks down the student definitions, the biggest change here is, well, number one, a blended student. So you could be partially virtual and partially on campus. But the other part that's specifically applicable to a home isolation would be a short-term distance learning student. In other words, a kiddo who was under quarantine or isolated because they had exposure, but could still continue to take advantage of school, much like in any way, shape, or form, either online or in a Google Classroom distantly with the same teacher that I had when I was quarantining. So it really takes care of that opportunity for, much like we talked about employees being able to teach if they were asymptomatic, then this allows students to learn if they're asymptomatic as well and still get credit for attendance based on a different learning model. So it really is a different way to look at how we deliver instruction. And because of the change in the law in the spring, it makes it available to us.
Just for clarification, understanding. So if I'm a student and you're my teacher and then I am exposed and I have to do the short-term thing, you're still my teacher. So that teacher now has to figure out how to do that, how to mitigate that, or how to, execute that.
Yep. So here's the thing, Rusty, what we're asking the teachers to do is to use Google Classroom as their learning management system. And Sean, you can jump in anytime you want. And what happens is if I'm using that as a model for implementation of my lesson plans, then the shift's easy. We actually brought in 2 of our elementary teachers as we worked through our blended learning committee last week, and we developed really a stipend for these folks to continue to help us process through it. But the idea is I'm already putting my lesson plans in Google Classroom, so I've got all of my tools for teaching, if you will, in the same place. So as I shift, my lesson plans aren't going to change. And the strategy is, as we start, we're going to be kind of quote unquote practicing, making sure we're using this learning management system while we're face to face in brick and mortar schools. So the shift should be seamless. So the assignments that I'm going to deliver to my student who's at home will be exactly the same as they would have been had they been in class. They may be handing them in later, bringing them after quarantine is over with, or maybe they're making arrangements to drop them off, but the actual assignments shouldn't change. And I don't know, Sean, if you want to try to jump in and
Yeah. One of the things that has helped us a lot, I think, is that we've been building capacity with this kind of design for many years. Our core teachers have been doing this process for a while at the secondary level, and we've been giving training to the remainder of our teachers at the primary level and also our elective teachers over the course of distance learning. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier in the meeting, that if we continue to provide training to our teachers this summer like we planned, the manner and the design that we're putting forth to design the layout and the organization of the Google Classroom, it's going to be like, let's say, for instance, right now, if you walk into a teacher's classroom and you see the schedule on the board, what to do Monday, what we're doing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that similar layout will be in Google Classroom. And so we're basically shifting the culture of the classroom to Google Classroom, and we're doing it on a daily basis so that it becomes more commonplace. And like I said, we've been building capacity for that in the secondary level for quite a while. So it's actually, if we do it the way we've been planning and the way we continue to plan, it should be quite easy for the teachers to make that transition for a short-term student when they go on quarantine or if they're sick with COVID.
The other thing that we're incorporating in our learning lab at the virtual academy off campus is the ability for folks that are choosing to be able to access our learning lab for tutoring services. So we're going to man that academy with the ability for parents to bring their kids. If there's a hard concept, I'm not getting long division and I need help with this particular piece of curriculum, then they can actually access the lab through extended hours. We're planning on opening up at 7:30, most days staying open till 5:30 or 6, with the exception of Friday. We're closing it. The plan is to close at 4. I think Monday's 5:30. So in a kind of a service delivery model, you really have the best of both worlds. I'm able to access my curriculum at home through the teacher that I have ordinarily, but if I need some tutoring, I can also access help from a certified teacher. Does that answer your question? Okay, so moving on to the through the change, you also see the Sand Springs Virtual Academy student and guardian contract. This is something we've implemented for a while now, meaning that we have agreement from the student and the parent that they understand what they're getting into in terms of expectations. And then if you scroll on down to the attendance policy, which is a big part of the change, it allows us to count attendance for kids that are partaking in the virtual academy, whether they're short-term distance learning or whether they're doing it full-time all year long. And so if you look at page 9, you'll see 3, number 1, 2, and 3 that shows you how we can calculate attendance for completion of either number 1, instructional activities for 90% of the days, or completion of 90% of all assigned coursework for the grading period, or maintaining pace for online or on-time course completion. So some of the programs themselves actually have a pace set so that we know percentage-wise what portion of their work should be completed by certain dates in the program. So it allows us some leeway to calculate attendance while they're going through the program and are at home.
Superintendent Darky, this is Ms. Arnold. I also want to share for the board members that student attendance is under FDC in our policy, and it cross-references. It says specifically in there cross-reference with EHDF, and that's one of the reasons we beef that up. We have that language that connects to that, so the two come together, so they do correlate.
Well, and this is strictly this part is strictly applicable to those that are partaking in distance learning.
Yes.
That took a little bit of crafting. We spent quite a bit of time on getting the wording just right for online attendance. And that's something that will be required for us to be allowed to count attendance for our kids that are accessing a distance program. Certainly a different way to look at how we do school. Great question, Rusty.
Television program policy EHDE.
I'm sorry, Mike, say that again. I couldn't hardly understand it.
It's referenced in this cross-reference. It says interactive television. I just not sure I know what that is.
So Kristen, can you explain the cross-references? There's several of them here.
So I'm sorry, I pulled my internet down. So I've got on FDC, Mr. Mullins, it says policy FDC, and you go in there and it says cross-reference policy EHDF, virtual/online attendance.
Yeah, I'm looking at policy, Kristen. I'm looking at the last one that you gave us, policy EHDF. And on the very last page, page 10, it references other cross-references and calls one of them interactive television. I'm just curious, do we really have that?
No, we don't. And so when we cross-reference policies, Mike, a lot of times what we find is when we cross-reference, you get some that are out of date. And so no, we don't have interactive television. That would be something that we probably need to go back and either rescind, which we've done a lot of over the last 4 years, but something that we need to go back in and probably pull on a board agenda for rescission, to rescind. Yeah, because truly we're delivering online instruction through Chromebook technology. And so most of it is through a learning management system. So that piece of policy is likely old and needing to be rescinded.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have some work to do in cross-referencing for this. The important part is for all online instruction to make sure that we have the ability to utilize the attendance for the kids that are online.
Superintendent, are you asking us to adopt these policies tonight, or is this just the first reading?
I would like to adopt them tonight before we go into August, because we know we have a lot of decisions to make between now and then. There's a possibility that we will never use any of them, but there's also a possibility as we start mitigating situations that we're going to have to make some changes.
Don't we have to revise that one?
What we're going to have to do is rescind that one that's on it. And so, yeah, that's probably going to be a revision that we're going to have to make to cross out that cross-reference. Yes. Yep.
What about the teacher initiative, the days? Is that what he was talking about?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Oh, yes, yes.
Not the 10 days, but the 3
Right.
days?
Yep, yep. So it looks like we need to probably ask you to approve A, B, and D, and let us go back and work on the letter C.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve 44 proposed approval of policy revisions for A, B, C, and D?
No, we're leaving out C.
A, B, and
Oh, I'm sorry, A, B, and D.
yeah.
I make the motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. A vote, please.
Sorry, who seconded?
I think that was Mike.
Okay. Okay. Gunn,
Aye.
Mullins,
Aye.
Noggle,
All right.
Wagner,
Aye.
Wagers.
Aye. Okay, do we have any announcements?
We do not.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second vote.
Gunn,
Aye.
Mullins,
Aye.
Noggle,
All right.
Wagner,
Aye.
Wagers.
Aye. All right, that
Thank
concludes
you.
our July 6th meeting.
Thank you, guys.
You.
Stay healthy.